Many of you called our newsroom or sent us messages on our Facebook page saying that you heard it. People in Boyle and Mercer counties reported a loud boom that shook their homes last night. Emergency crews investigated but couldn't find any sign of an explosion. But as Phil Pendleton tells us, they have an idea what caused that noise.
He said was he sent me an article about the explosion.
Felicia Kelly and her daughter Michaela say they like the quiet, peaceful farmland area around Parksville in western Boyle County.
This is as loud as it gets out here.
So you can imagine the surprise when that tranquility was suddenly broken Thursday night.
Sounded like a loud, like an explosion or something. I mean, it wasn't. It was kind of different because it was just kind of a dull boom.
Yeah, it was more of a sound. It was a boom, you know, it was a loud explosion type boom.
Larry Curtis heard it too.
I thought, well, maybe the gas line, something had exploded up the road or down the road, and I just couldn't see it yet, and that's the first thing that went through my mind.
In fact, the Danville 911 Center received at least 15 phone calls. It was apparently heard in neighboring Mercer, Lincoln, and Garrett counties as well. There's been a lot of theories floating around as to what exactly it was. The prevailing one, police are telling me, possibly a meteor shower and the resulting sonic boom from that. So far, no one has told us of actually seeing a meteor streak across the sky, but many quickly turned to social media to talk it up.
I checked social media later and it was blowing up saying there was some kind of explosion. I had no idea what was going on.
Other than homes shaking or windows rattling, officials did not receive any damage reports. In Boyle County, Phil Pendleton, WKYT.
And some people told us they actually heard two loud booms, but no one reported actually seeing anything in the sky.
Firefighters in Garland, Texas found a person dead inside a submerged car. Police believe the driver tried to drive through high waters and the car was swept away. So far, 3 people have been confirmed killed by the floods. Search teams in Tarrant County still trying to find a woman who was last seen in a car trapped by rising water. A sheriff's deputy who was trying to save her got swept away by the rushing water. That deputy survived, rescued after clinging to a tree for 2 hours. The driver she tried to save.
Extreme weather cost several people their lives over the holiday weekend, many of those deaths occurring in Kansas. But the problems fanned out across a variety of other states, including Texas and Oklahoma, where ice amounts climbed well above a half an inch. Thousands of people are still in the dark, and hundreds of extra crew members have been called in to help restore power. So whether you're trying to get around by vehicle or even on foot, the roads remain very, very slippery, and many people are being told to hold off on travel unless absolutely necessary.
What was once a lush green pasture has turned to this. a barren, crackled earth littered by remnants of life. It's been 6 months since it last rained here, and for 42-year-old Sularno, this drought, expected to be the country's worst in the last 5 years, is taking away his livelihood.
The wells have run dry here. I had to sell my cattle so that we have some money for drinking water. Nothing grows in my field anymore.
This drought is exacerbated by the effects of El Niño, that is the warming of the Pacific Ocean's water that induces prolonged drought and cyclones, among others, across the globe. While the effects of El Niño this year have yet to be calculated, it is obvious here. Farmers now have to depend on the government's financial support for food, including for basic necessities like drinking water. And this grim scene of people lining up for clean water has become the norm here.
95% of the area here is suffering from this drought. They're now totally dependent on these water deliveries to survive.
Marty and his team has been working non-stop to deliver water, and they are not alone. The Indonesian National Disaster Control Agency recorded drought in at least 102 regencies in 16 provinces across the country.
This is the main water source for the area, and for months now it's been dry. And with no signs of change in the weather, the effects will be catastrophic, not only for the people here, but also nationwide.
As Sularno's plight is shared by hundreds of thousands of farmers across Indonesia, over 100,000 hectares of rice harvest have failed already, raising concerns on the nation's food security.
Pada musim kemarau ini banyak sekali mengalami penyusutan.
Our biggest concern is that these people now are already selling their belongings to buy water and food. If the drought doesn't end soon, they will be totally dependent on our emergency food supply.
The Indonesian government insists food stocks are still sufficient for now and has made plans to import rice if El Niño goes beyond November this year. But for Sularno and many of the farmers across the country, they can't afford to wait that long.
Tapi bagi saya sendiri memang sudah menipis gitu.
Our last year's harvests are dwindling. Well, a lot of people here have run out. We don't know what to do.
Spokesperson Igor Konashenkov said the strikes were launched as soon as the pilot reached a Russian base. He said Russian bombers and Syrian government missiles hit the region for a long period of time, and terrorists operating in the area were eliminated. And Konashenkov also said Russia's Air Force flew 134 sorties and hit 449 terrorist targets across Syria over the last 3 days, and videos of the operations have been released.
New for you this morning, details of that Russian fighter jet that was shot down by Turkish military. The Turkish government says that it will hand over the pilot's body back to Russia, despite being at odds with the country since the incident on Tuesday. We're getting this announcement hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin signed economic sanctions against Turkey. Let's go now live to CNN correspondent Ian Lee. He's in Istanbul. First, let's discuss the handover of this pilot's body. How did this come about, and when will it happen?
Well, it happened early in the morning, at least from Syria. The Turkmen rebels in Syria handed over to Turkish officials. It was met at the border around 1 a.m. in the morning here, local time. That body was met also by men from the Orthodox faith. They took the body, prepared the body. That body now is going to be handed over to the Russians. But this is an important development. Russia has been demanding this for quite some time. This is something that Turkey hopes will help smooth the tensions, but it seems a bit unlikely at this time.
Of Downing Street in London on Saturday. They chanted "Don't bomb Syria." Protests were also held in other British cities. Elsewhere in Europe, hundreds of people demonstrated on Saturday in the Spanish capital of Madrid. They shouted slogans against the French military operations in Syria and called for peace. After the Paris attacks that killed 130 people, France responded by declaring war on the Islamic State and demanded its EU partners provide support.
Of this incident shows unseen gunmen shoot Tahir Elchi. He had just delivered a statement calling for an end to violence between Turkey and Kurdish rebels. The violence quickly escalates as plainclothes officers, rally-goers, and media are caught in a hail of bullets. The officers began firing back in several directions, then helped civilians retreat to safety. 2 police officers were killed, and later in Istanbul, police fired tear gas and water cannons to break up thousands protesting the attorney's killing.
To disperse protesters in a mainly Kurdish city of Diyarbakir in southeastern Turkey, where the shooting took place. Witnesses say lawyer Tahir Elchi was shot by a single bullet in the head after speaking to the media. He was head of the Bar Association in Diyarbakir and a campaigner for Kurdish rights. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said it was unclear whether Elchi was caught in crossfire or assassinated. The pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party called the killing of the lawyer a planned assassination and urged the people to protest. People also took to the streets in the capital Ankara and Turkey's largest city, Istanbul, to denounce the killing.
Turkey a $3.2 billion aid package and a boost for its membership bid in exchange for its cooperation with the migrant crisis at a summit on Sunday, although key issues remain to be hammered out. Turkey is the main gateway for refugees to reach Europe from Syria, 2.2 million of whom are currently in Turkey. Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, standing in for President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is also set to win a deal for the opening in December of a new chapter in Turkey's stalled accession talks for the 28-nation bloc. EU President Donald Tusk said in his invitation letter to leaders that the summit will mark an important step in developing our relations and contribute to managing the migration crisis.
Our top story this morning, an investigation is underway in Colorado following a deadly attack on a Planned Parenthood facility. A gunman shot and killed 3 people, including a police officer. That officer, Garrett Swayze, was a member of the University of Colorado Police Department in Colorado Springs. 5 other officers and 4 civilians were wounded in the attack.
It happened in Colorado Springs, about 70 miles south of Denver. A dramatic standoff with police ended after 5 hours. The suspected gunman, Robert Louis Deere of North Carolina, is in custody this morning. David Begnaud is in Colorado Springs with the latest. David, good morning.
Vanita, good morning. About 100 yards behind me is the Planned Parenthood facility where it all happened. This morning, it is still a very active crime scene with investigators going through it room by room. Within the last hour, the body of Officer Swayze was transported under heavy police escort to a local funeral home. Also, the suspect has been booked into the El Paso County Jail. He is being held without bail and is scheduled to appear in court on Monday. Our sources telling us he surrendered yesterday after realizing he was cornered and had nowhere to run, and ever since then has been cooperating with investigators.
The frightening moments were captured on police scanners after authorities say the man opened fire on officers who were responding to reports of an active shooter.
I've been shot. Come back to my car.
With the gunman still on the loose inside the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood, police were able to rescue people hiding inside the building, including Katanya Crown.
I heard everyone in the lobby screaming, get down, and then I saw a gunman walking with a shotgun just shooting randomly.
He was aiming for my head. It's just weird to stare into the face of somebody like that. And he didn't win.
Well, this was a terrible, terrible tragedy. It could have been much worse but for the actions of the first responders, particularly the police officers involved.
The situation was further complicated because law enforcement was concerned the gunman brought explosives.
We have eyes on him. He is coming towards the front of the business.
We did get officers inside of the building at the Planned Parenthood, and the officers were able to shout to the suspect and make communication with him. And at that point, they were able to get him to surrender, and he was taken into custody.
We have our suspect right now. He's saying that he is alone and he's by himself. Okay, good job.
We saw a lot of individual acts of bravery today, and actually a lot of bravery as a team.
9 other people were shot, but are listed in good condition at a local hospital. Vanita, as for Officer Swayze, he leaves behind a wife, a son, and a daughter.
David Begnaud in Colorado Springs, thank you.
Happening tonight, a number of Walmart locations across the state forced to temporarily evacuate or close due to reported bomb threats. So far, we've been able to confirm these locations in Biddeford, Scarborough, Windham, Calais, Skowhegan, Palmyra, and Holton. Police in these locations say the threats were phoned in just after 7:30 this evening using what appears to be an automated voice message with a male voice. So far, we have confirmed Biddeford, Skowhegan, and Scarborough locations were cleared and reopened. We have reached out to Walmart's corporate offices. We will continue to update this story on WMTW.com.
For the first time, local scientists are linking mercury exposure in dolphins with mercury exposure in humans. The 2-year study at FAU Harbor Branch centered around dolphins that live in the Indian River Lagoon. Dolphins and humans eat similar types of fish. Scientists found elevated levels of mercury in the dolphins and in more than half of the human test subjects as well.
So we did skin samples from these animals and looked at mercury concentrations as well as blood. With the humans, we sampled pieces of hair where we were able to look at human past exposure to mercury.
Now, scientists say no one is telling anyone to stop eating fish or shellfish, but just be aware there seems to be a connection at these early stages. The new study, or rather a new study, another one, is underway focusing on pregnant women and mercury exposure, since exposure in developing fetuses can lead to long-term learning problems.
Protection of our airspace, land border, is not only a right, but a duty for my government. And no Turkish Prime Minister or President or authority will apologize because of doing our duty. Turkish airspace, protection of Turkish airspace, Turkish borders is a national duty, and our army did their job to protect this airspace.
What we saw last week is not the first example of violation of Turkish airspace by Russian planes. And as I said, the information we have is consistent with the information we have got from Turkey. But our focus now is on de-escalating the situation, is calming tensions, and we would welcome direct contacts between Ankara and Moscow. And again, it's the sovereign right of Turkey to defend its own airspace.
A light show of a different sort in Michigan. Heavy snow sparked a power line fire near Detroit's famed 8 Mile Road. You can see bright blue flashes of light behind the homes. If you look closely, you can see the power line turn orange, then snap. Finally, the transformer catches fire. No reports of any injuries. The Detroit metro area was socked with record snowfall on November 21st. Up to a foot fell in some areas. Downed power lines left tens of thousands of people without power. I'm Danielle Banks, the Weather Channel.
Oklahoma is waking up to a 4.5 magnitude earthquake that struck this morning 91 miles northwest of Oklahoma City. Now, this is the second earthquake in just 2 weeks. The last one was 4.7. A lot of people are reporting feeling this earthquake. So far, though, no injuries have been reported.
A state of emergency has been declared in the state of Oklahoma due to the ice storm that we had over the weekend. I mean, it was devastating in a lot of spots. You see the truck in the middle of a restaurant there. That was actually in Amarillo, and really the whole region out there had to deal with ice. The thing with ice is that not only does it make the roads extremely dangerous, I mean, you saw what happened with all the traffic accidents that we had. At least 11 people were killed over the weekend. But it also can bring down power lines. Just the weight of that water, once it freezes, it gets so heavy, and it can take down the power lines. It can take down trees on top of the power lines. At one point over the weekend in Oklahoma alone, we had over 100,000 people without power. Here's a recap of what Winter Storm Kara did. And of course, the ice was the big story with this one. You see all those little blue dots? Those are where we had reports of significant icing. Keep in mind, this is an ongoing situation. Still a lot of people without power, but the crews are starting to hack away at it.
Despite protests from conservation groups, Japan has announced that it'll send a whaling fleet to the Antarctic on Tuesday. According to a statement jointly issued by the country's Fisheries Agency and Foreign Ministry on Monday, the upcoming expedition will run through early March. Japan plans to catch 333 minke whales each year over the next 12 years, about 1/3 of what it used to kill. The decision comes following a one-year suspension after a ruling by the International Court of Justice last year that the hunts were not truly scientific. But Tokyo has insisted that whales need to be killed for research. Some also claim the hunts are an inherent part of the Japanese culture. Meat from the killed mammals, long considered a delicacy in Japan, is processed into food.
Millions of people living in cities spread across northeastern China have been told to stay indoors to avoid the effects of severe air pollution. Large parts of northeast China have disappeared under the thick blanket of smog. In parts of the capital, Beijing, visibility has dropped to a few hundred meters. Beijing's readings of PM 2.5, a measurement of tiny, harmful particles in the air, has hit more than 600 in some parts of the city, more than 24 times the daily limits suggested by the World Health Organization. City authorities have issued a pollution orange alert, limiting some factory production, construction, and the use of heavy trucks in an effort to clean the air. However, the smog is expected to remain in place for at least another day, until heavy winds help blow it away.
The threshold of 2 degrees Celsius, just to give you an idea of the government agreed upon temperature, that means that once we reach 2 degrees Celsius, all the adverse weather conditions are irreversible. So that's why this is so important. Smog yesterday in Beijing, the highest level they had seen in quite some time. An orange alert in effect. The last time an orange alert was February of 2014. Most of the day yesterday was over 500. They reached 600, which is 25 times above the acceptable levels put out by the World Health Organization. They're at 452, and look how early it is in the morning there. Yeah, it's at 7. Here we go. Look at all the burgundy. There's 629. So from Beijing to southward, this entire air mass is just completely choking everyone, and it gets better. But of course, many times we'll see the smog move into areas of South Korea and Japan, and of course they blame them because everything moves in that direction. But here's the report. 900-page report for the future of China. 550 scientists are saying temperatures are rising faster in China than the global average. We're up 1 degree Celsius, right? But since 1909, they're up 1.5. Even if we set the goal and we reach the goal of 2 degrees Celsius, China is going to rise their temperatures nearly 3 degrees. For every centimeter of sea level rise, 10 meters of coastline is lost. Remember this picture? This is Shanghai today. This is from Climate Central. This is 2 degrees. They're already at 1.5. This is what it looks like at 4 degrees. Now, again, that is amazing. So the cost, renewable energy is not going to go down anytime soon. We don't have the time to wait, so you got to pay for that. Longer and stronger seawalls for the sea level rise. Development of crop varieties. The season starts early and it's shorter because it's so hot. So they've got to find out different types of crops that will be able to grow in a shorter amount of time, irrigation. Everything is going to evaporate. They're not going to be able to catch anything in water basins. Here it is again. Shanghai at 2 degrees. Now take a look at this. If it reaches 4 degrees, look at the loss of land. Shanghai is expected in 30 years to see a sea level rise of 14.5 centimeters. That's 140 meters of coastline lost. Can you imagine that? That's just one city. They're not even in the top 15.
The pictures of this, I mean, I think everyone has seen them, and they're really seared into people's minds. Is the Brazilian government saying that this could have been prevented?
That's definitely part of their argument, Maggie. I think that's twofold here. First of all, at the summit in Paris today, during her speech, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, one of the first things she said is, thanks to a couple of irresponsible companies, Brazil has suffered its worst environmental disaster ever. So on the one hand, they're talking about prevention. They could have been taking better care of these wastewater dams, but there's also the warning system that's part of the human tragedy here. Now, remember, BHP Billiton is joint owner of the Samarco mine operator, along with Brazil's Vale. And it was at the beginning of this month that those dams burst. And while initially the toxic sludge rushed over and flooded the town below, killing more than 12 people, as you mentioned, it also covered 800 kilometers of a riverbed, went out to the ocean, destroying the water supply for hundreds of thousands of people, the ecosystems, even the coastline. Fish were washing up. So the idea is, up until now, BHP and Vale had talked about setting up an emergency fund. They'd also suffered some pretty small fines. So this is Brazil finally flexing its muscle and saying, no, we're going to make these companies pay for the damages. Could they have been better prepared to avoid the disaster, to at least warn the residents when it did happen? These are the two questions, of course, that they want answered. And this fund would be used to set up a 10-year environmental cleanup plan for the whole Rio Dulce.
There's concern tonight over a potentially large fish die-off. It follows several large fish kills off Long Island's East End, and environmentalists say the state needs to find the cause. CBS 2's Elise Finch with the story tonight.
The entrance to the Glen Cove Creek from the Long Island Sound seems normal, yet a closer look shows the waters teeming with bunker fish drawn in by warming waters and now competing with each other to survive.
There's a lot of fish in a small area. They use up the oxygen and they're just fighting to breathe.
Lieutenant Demler estimates well over 100,000 bunkerfish have crowded the creek this year, their gills and mouths wide open, desperately trying to draw in more oxygen. Dozens have already died, some sinking to the bottom, others floating to shore to be picked apart by seagulls.
They're just waiting for an easy meal. They've been doing it all morning.
This follows a massive fish die-off on the island's east end. So many dead fish washed ashore, fishermen had to be paid to haul them away. Environmentalists believe this latest die-off is being caused by a lot more than a lack of oxygen in the water.
We could do more testing of the waters, we could understand the science better about what's happening, and we can put into action keeping people accountable.
Adrienne Esposito of the Citizens Campaign for the Environment says the state needs to go after tankers spilling oil in the Sound. She also says the state should target leaking shoreline septic tanks and the excessive use of pesticides and fertilizers that decrease oxygen levels. Local Dean Yoder pleads guilty to that practice.
People are not doing enough. I don't even know that I'm doing enough. I still use fertilizers on my yard.
Meanwhile, the hope is colder temperatures will help boost oxygen levels and prevent yet another massive die-off. In Glen Cove, Elise Finch, CBS 2 News.